On June 7th, Russia's Air Force lost another of its Su-35 fighter jets. It's the eighth of these 4.5-generation fighters the country has lost since Vladimir Putin launched his supposed special military operation. However, the loss of that jet isn't the real headline. What matters most is how Ukraine managed to pull off this massive victory. For months, it's been systematically destroying one of the most vital aircraft in Putin's arsenal. The target? Russia's limited numbers of A-50 aircraft. And by destroying those A-50s, Ukraine is blinding Russia by taking out its eyes in the sky. On June 7th, Ukraine managed to shoot down a Russian Su-35 fighter jet. Initial reports, such as those published by the War Zone, suggest that Ukraine used one of its F-16s to pull off the remarkable feat. It now seems those reports were wrong. It wasn't an F-16 that took out the Su-35. According to the AV-Vector X account, it now seems that Ukraine destroyed the valuable fighter jet using a surface-to-air missile. AV-Vector says, according to updated information, the Su-35 fighter jet that took off from Borysoglebsk Air Base was shot down by a surface-to-air missile system. We don't know what system Ukraine used, but it doesn't matter. The headline was that one of Russia's most valuable fighter jets had been permanently grounded. Ukraine's attack cost Putin an $85 million piece of hardware and whittled away further at the stockpile of 100 Su-35s Russia is believed to maintain. Without that Su-35, Russia would face limitations with sorties, granting Ukraine the opportunity to regain control over the skies within its own territory. That was the story. But lurking behind the Su-35 takedown is a far larger story that reveals not only how Ukraine managed to destroy the fighter jet, but also a new tactic it's using that may make Russia's Air Force completely useless. That's according to military correspondent David Axe, who published a June 8th article to Trench Art, showing us that the real story here isn't that an Su-35 was destroyed, it's that this attack was made possible because Ukraine has been systematically taking out Russia's A-50 aircraft. That matters because the A-50 serves as Russia's eyes in the skies over Ukraine. The Russian Air Force isn't exactly blind, Axe writes, but it's getting blinder as Ukraine continues to whittle down the Air Force's aerial radar coverage by blowing up Beriev A-50 radar planes. Suddenly, the Su-35 shootdown makes more sense. It didn't seem likely that Ukraine could take down one of Russia's premier fighter jets with a much older F-16. When it was revealed that Ukraine actually used a surface-to-air missile, even that seemed a stretch. The Su-35 can travel at speeds of up to Mach 2.25, according to the national interest, and it would have been surrounded by air defense systems as it took off from the Borysoglebsk Air Base. The only way Ukraine could have pulled this off was by taking out Russia's eyes in the skies. Its systematic approach to destroying A-50s means it's done precisely that. To understand how, we need to explore the A-50 and what it delivers to Russia's Air Force. Army recognition calls the Beriev A-50, which has the NATO codename of Mainstay, an Airborne Warning and Control System or AWACS aircraft. The US Air Force says that AWACS are vital because they provide situational awareness of friendly, neutral, or hostile activity, command and control of an area of responsibility, battle management of theater forces, all-altitude and all-weather surveillance of the battle space, and early warning of enemy actions. In other words, countries use AWACS to maintain eyes on the sky, the aircraft's radar systems delivering vital data to everybody from other pilots to forces on the ground. No AWACS means extremely limited aerial surveillance, and those limitations open up opportunities for strikes like the one that destroyed an Su-35 on June 7th. The A-50 is far from the best or newest example of an AWACS aircraft in the world. Army recognition notes that it's yet another of the Soviet-era relics Putin has deployed in Ukraine, with the aircraft first entering service in 1984. By 1992, Russia had produced 40 A-50s, though it only had 16 of them left by the time Putin launched his special military operation against Ukraine. That was already a problem for Russia. With less than half of its A-50 stockpile left, Russia's ability to surveil Ukraine's forces was already compromised. Each A-50, crewed by 15 people, 10 of whom occupy the aircraft's display controls and communication systems. That large crew is needed to decipher the data gathered by the aircraft's surveillance radar, which comes via an antenna installed into the rotating radome mounted on the A-50's fuselage. Despite its age, the A-50 is surprisingly effective. It's capable of flying and detecting aerial activity in any weather condition and at all altitudes, Army recognition points out. It has a flight ceiling of 32,808 feet, from which it conducts its surveillance patrols, and it can stay in the air for 7 hours and 40 minutes before it needs to refuel. However, flight endurance and patrol time are two different things. The A-50 is slightly limited by a patrol time of just 1 hour and 25 minutes. However, it makes up for that by being capable of flying at a top speed of 497 miles per hour over a range of 3,107 miles. That's not fast enough to evade a Ukrainian missile or fighter jet. That's not the point. The A-50 is supposed to stay out of the range of both while using its radar to provide in-depth data about the aerial battlefield. Army Recognition says that this complex radar is part of an early warning and control system that includes several key components. Inside the A-50 is a digital computer system, a data pickup and display system, and equipment for encoding sensitive communications used to transmit the data the A-50 picks up to other units. The aircraft also has a self-defense system, a set of friendly interceptors it can deploy whenever it's threatened by an enemy's guided or unguided weapons. Those interceptors act as decoys while the A-50 escapes the scene whenever it comes under threat. What the A-50 does, according to Axe, is fly behind the Ukraine war's front lines while constantly scanning the skies. Russia keeps it out of harm's way as much as possible, allowing it to track any Ukrainian missiles or aircraft that threaten to penetrate that front line. Think of it as an aircraft capable of creating an invisible radar-based barrier. The threats the A-50 detects can make it through that barrier unharmed. However, the fact that those threats are detected as soon as they cross allows Russia to prepare defenses against the incoming threat. That's what should have happened on June 7th. As soon as the Ukrainian surface-to-air missile crossed the front line near Kursk en route to Borysaglebsk Air Base, Russia should have known about it and had its air defense systems ready to shoot that missile out of the skies. It didn't. No A-50 picked up the incoming missile, meaning the Su-35 had no idea that a threat was incoming until it was too late. Soaring high above the ground cover and capable of repositioning as needed, Axe writes, the A-50s have helped Russian commanders to keep an eye on the Ukrainian Air Force and to detect, minutes in advance, incoming Ukrainian missiles and drones. That help has been coming since the early days of Putin's invasion. Back in November 2022, the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, published a paper diving into the air defense requirements of both the Russian and Ukrainian air forces. RUSI says that A-50s flew an average of 2 to 3 sorties per day during the early stages of Putin's invasion. However, even then, the A-50 was proving limited in its effectiveness as a force multiplier for Russia. First, Ukrainian forces have found A-50 to be fairly easy to degrade via electronic attack and report consistent success in doing so. That's a symptom of the A-50's age. Its dated computerized systems aren't able to withstand modern electronic warfare techniques, though Ukraine still faces the problem of getting within range to apply those techniques. Second, the paper claims, because the Russian air operation is subordinated to the ground forces, surveillance information is not typically related directly between A-50M and fighters on CAP, or to long-range GBAD units, such as S-400 batteries. In other words, Russia wasn't using its A-50s to keep its air defense units informed of incoming threats back in November 2022. It didn't need to. Ukraine wasn't in a position to launch strikes within Russia's territory at that point. A lot has changed since November 2022. Ukrainian strikes inside Russia are now a common occurrence, with the June 7th attack against the Su-35 being a perfect example. So the A-50's purpose had likely changed since the early days of the war. It's still providing information to ground troops, however, these planes are also patrolling the front lines constantly to serve as an early warning system that allows Russia to prepare its internal air defense systems whenever Ukraine launches drone or missile attacks. Let's come back to those 2 or 3 sorties per day. Axe says that was made possible because Russia was able to deploy 9 A-50s during the early months of the invasion. Therein lies Russia's new problem. Ukraine cottoned on to how important the A-50 was to Russia early on. Though the aircraft was ancient and susceptible to electronic warfare techniques, Ukraine ultimately decided that the best way to deal with Russia's eyes in the skies was to take them out directly. A metaphorical finger was sent straight into those eyes so they would no longer be able to see what was coming. With those eyes gone, Ukraine discovered that it could carve safe aerial pathways through Russia's defenses to make its strikes on enemy territory more effective than ever before. Ukraine's campaign against Russia's A-50s started in February 2023. That's when Ukraine managed to damage an A-50 on the ground in Belarus, which Putin used as one of his staging grounds for his invasion. Fast forward to January 2024, and another A-50 was taken out above the Sea of Azov. This one was destroyed using a Patriot missile, says Axe. A month later, Ukraine reported that it had conducted a joint operation between its main intelligence directorate and its air force to shoot down an A-50U aircraft over the Sea of Azov. This time, Ukraine managed to use a Soviet-era S-200 to do the job. That ancient air defense system has been a surprisingly effective weapon for Ukraine, as we revealed in a video covering how Ukraine is turning its S-200s into monsters. Then we come to the most recent destruction of an A-50. Earlier in June, Ukraine launched what it dubbed Operation Spiderweb. The mission was a masterclass in Ukrainian ingenuity, with months of planning leading to Ukraine sneaking dozens of quadcopter drones into Russia in the back of specially designed storage units loaded onto the backs of trucks. Those storage units had special sealing compartments used to hide the drones, reported the War Zone on June 2nd. Ukraine stored its trucks in Russian warehouses close to several key air bases. When it was ready to strike, it fooled Russian drivers into taking those trucks to pre-designated locations close to the targeted airfields. Once there, the special sealing compartments opened and Ukraine's drones flew to the air bases. Initial reports suggested that Ukraine had destroyed 40 of Russia's most valuable bombers in Operation Spiderweb, decimating the country's ability to launch aerial attacks against Ukraine from behind the front lines. But also among the damaged aircraft were a pair of A-50s, both of which had their radar domes struck by Ukrainian drones. As with the Su-35 strike a few days later, it was the loss of offensive aircraft that took the headlines. However, the destruction of 2 more of Russia's A-50s may have been the biggest long-term win Ukraine gained from Operation Spiderweb. A pair of Russian eye in the skies were poked out, potentially forever, further compromising Russia's ability to detect future Ukrainian aerial attacks. All of this created a massive problem for Putin. He's running out of A-50s. The Kyiv Independent says that the loss of these aircraft cost Russia around $350 million per A-50. It also points out that Kirilo Budanov, who leads Ukraine's defense intelligence, said that there were only 6 A-50s left in Russia following the February 2024 downing of an A-50 over the Sea of Azov. Add the 2 that were destroyed during Operation Spiderweb, and that seems to bring Russia's total down to 4. David Axe has slightly different figures. He says that Russia currently has 7 A-50s left at maximum, though the reality is that it likely has far fewer. According to Axe, Russia grounded its remaining A-50s following the 2024 strikes. From there, it decided to start flying the planes in cycles as it scrambled to replace those it had already lost. But Putin had another problem. As he tried to do this cycling, he was also sending the damaged A-50s to the Aviation Scientific and Technical Complex. Responsible for building and maintaining A-50s, that complex is located in Taganrog, which is a city on the coast of the Sea of Azov and lies just 80 miles from the Ukraine war's front lines. You can probably guess what happened next. In December 2024, Ukraine struck the Taganrog facility. Ukraine used an ATACMS missile provided by the United States in the strike, says Militani. That missile, along with a horde of drones, arrived at Taganrog at 4 a.m. on the morning of December 11th, causing a massive fire in the plant, as well as power and heating outages in Taganrog itself. Again, we see Ukraine's intelligent approach to the battle against Putin in play. It took out A-50s to partially blind Russia in the sky, and when Putin tried to send those damaged A-50s to the optician, Ukraine took out the only facility Russia has for building A-50s in response. All of this means that every lost A-50 is now likely lost forever. At the very least, Russia won't be able to get any more of them in the skies before the Ukraine war ends, because any facility it tries to create to do so will be targeted by Ukraine. Add the cost of a single A-50 to these problems, remember that a single A-50 costs $350 million to build, and Russia is dealing with a situation where it's slowly losing some of its most valuable aircraft and can't do a thing about it. Putin tried. In March 2024, the war zone reported that Russia had made a plan to build more A-50s after the loss of those over the Sea of Azov. The plan was characterized as desperate by the outlet, though it was also necessary, seeing as Russia has nowhere near enough of its more advanced A-100 AWACS units to send into the skies. But those plans were quickly cancelled, Axe reports, with any possibility of them being reactivated going up in flames, along with the plant used to build A-50s when Ukraine hit Taganrog in December 2024. The upshot is that by this spring, the Russian Air Force may have been down to 6 or fewer active A-50s, with no clear plan for implementing or replacing them, Axe writes. That's in line with Budanov's 2024 claim, with the or fewer possibly covering the 2 A-50s Russia lost as a result of Operation Spiderweb. Some sources claim just 2 or 3 A-50s are flyable, Axe says. And that brings us to what all of this really means for Russia. Losing so many of its eyes in the skies is damaging in general because of what the A-50 delivers to Russian pilots, air defense systems, and ground forces. However, only having 2 or 3 of them available is a massive issue for Russia for a simple reason. It needs at least 3 A-50 early warning orbits to cover the entire 700-mile Ukraine war front line. That doesn't mean 3 A-50s in total, Axe explains. Instead, each of those orbits comprises a trio of A-50s. One will be on station flying over and around the front line, another is returning to base, and the third will be in maintenance, waiting to be cycled back into action. So Russia needs 9 A-50s to cover the entire front line. That's not even considering the fact that Russia would ideally have more than 9, so it has A-50s spare for training new crews. If Russia only has 3 A-50s available, Putin is forced into making some tough choices. Either he focuses on one orbit, meaning his A-50s can only cover one out of the southern, eastern, or northern sections of the front line. Whichever he chooses leaves the other 2 portions vulnerable. Or Putin deploys all 3 at the same time to get full coverage. However, those A-50s can't stay in the skies forever and will eventually have to come back to base, leading to vulnerabilities again. Putin is now stuck between a rock and a hard place because there's simply no way for him to achieve optimal A-50 coverage anymore. That matters because Russia is preparing to launch a renewed summer offensive targeting Sumy via Kursk. According to Euromaidan Press, Putin has already amassed 50,000 troops in preparation for the Sumy offensive as of June 6th. The Guardian says that Russia's forces are closing in on the city, which lies 200 miles northeast of Kyiv, as we speak. Yet Sumy's governor isn't sounding the alarm, and according to the Kyiv Independent on June 8th, claims that there are no grounds for an evacuation of the city at this point. Perhaps the loss of so many A-50s has something to do with that. If Putin doesn't deploy his trio of remaining A-50s to the emerging Sumy front line, his soldiers on the ground lack the support they need to carry out his intended summer offensive. That will be ideal for Ukraine. It can defend itself against Russia's human waves, especially when those waves have practically no access to aerial intelligence, and can use its HIMARS and similar systems to devastate Putin's invading forces. If Putin does decide to deploy his A-50s near Sumy, that means he has no eyes in the skies over Donetsk or in Ukraine's south. Any ground he gains in Sumy may mean little because the lack of A-50s in other areas means Ukraine may have opportunities to retake lost territory in Donetsk or Ukraine's south. Again, Putin, rock, hard place. No matter which decision Russia's leader makes, he can't overcome the fact that he doesn't have enough A-50s, can't repair those that Ukraine has damaged, and can't build more. And the reality he now has to face is that Ukraine only needs to take out one more A-50 to rid Russia of the last orbit it has. Russian fighter pilots aren't flying blind everywhere along the front line in Ukraine and western Russia, Axe concludes. But with just one A-50 orbit to extend the fighters' radar horizons, they are flying essentially blind somewhere. If Ukraine continues its attacks and takes out the rest of Russia's A-50s, Russia may never be able to fully exert its aerial advantage again. Putin's spirit may have been crushed forever by Ukraine's intelligent attacks. To find out how, check out our video on the long-lasting impact Operation Spiderweb has had on Russia. Trust us, that impact extends far beyond the already devastating loss of 2 A-50s. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.